Me.
Oh my goodness.
All the
He's
beautiful
got the
creatures.
puppy.
So
This is Henry.
This is Henry. How old is Henry now?
Uh, 4.
Oh, little Henry.
Julio, how are you?
I get Jojo.
Oh my gosh, she's so big.
I know, she's huge. I know,
How-
she's
how-
15 months.
Oh my God.
I know, time flies.
This is a cute overload, man. I can't take it.
She's
Exactly.
a cutie.
It's exactly what I needed after yesterday. I tell you. Nice.
Well,
Oh, the whole family.
Your name's
oh,
what? It is.
oh. Well, Santa. I guess it's Santa for you.
It is.
When you mentioned this for Dallas Opera, and I immediately thought of Laura because Laura's from Dallas, and Laura and I've known each other and worked together now for 30 years.
Wow.
And we both have important relationships with the Dallas Opera, but we've never worked together in Dallas.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, that's odd.
But so I thought it would be, might be interesting for people. But
Yeah.
Laura, when did you audition for Marilla? Was that
It was in
1989?
1989. Yeah, in New
Okay,
York.
so it's more than 30 years. And we used to have. I remember very specifically. I hope I remember this right, Laura. you sang for us in New York, and you sang Senza Mama.
I did. Oh my God! I was hoping you'd forgotten.
Well, no, who would forget that? But and Laura was not probably much more than 20 at that time.
Yeah, I was 20.
And of course, Senza Mama is a big, spinto soprano aria, but she didn't know that at the time. And it was a soprano aria, and she was a soprano, so she sang it.
And I loved it.
And she did it magnificently. That's what was.
Oh, that
that's
I don't
what,
know. Oh.
Well, that's what I remember so much. It's like I don't care, at this stage if she knows that she's going to sing Turandot or Gilda. I don't care. What you're looking for is that connection and that artistry.
I remember that I loved that aria so much because it was so anguished and whatever. And then at the end, it has this, that
That's
nice,
right.
and I could just kind of throw that out there and kind of float it for a while. And I thought, let's see Leontine try that. She did actually. Oh,
She did.
oh yeah.
And I
Yeah,
also
that.
remember, speaking of pets, I also remember that we used to have when the Marellini were selected for Merrill, we used to have them fill out a form, on paper then,
Yeah.
of any
What do you mean?
of any special housing requirements or dietary things or whatever, just getting to know the artists who we'd selected. And I was reading through them, and Laura's the only one who ever wrote this. She said, "I just need to have a place for my pet iguana." And I thought, okay, she's bringing an iguana to San Francisco. So we made sure that she had a place where you could keep her iguana.
Well, I actually didn't bring him with me. I
Oh,
didn't
okay.
bring him. No, I didn't
You
bring
did
him to
eventually.
Maryland. But I did eventually, yeah, when I moved out there when I was an Adler Fellow, yeah. Because it was just the summer,
How much?
Yeah.
How much space does an iguana really need?
Iguanas
He
are
wasn't that
big. Mine was big.
Was
But does he
that-
stay in
was
a? Do they stay in like a glass case, or does he just you put him on a leash and walk him around?
Yeah, in an aquarium.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and Kiwi, or Kiwi te Iguana, as his name was.
Whoa! Can't just skate by that one, Laura. Tell us the name of your iguana again.
Kiwi te Iguana. His name was Kiwi. So he he was quite big actually. He was like his body was this big.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and
he
then
was.
his tail was like out to here. And he would climb. He loved in Christmas time. He would climb my Christmas tree and kind of stand there.
It's the best Christmas ornament ever.
Exactly.
It's a rainforest Christmas.
I remember the iguana. I knew him a little bit.
Yeah, he was very nice. He'd wander around.
I just made a note in my notes to make sure that you send us a picture of Kiwi Iguana.
I gotta find it.
Kiwi
Yeah, I don't know.
Kiwi, Kiwi, not
Kiwi.
Kiri.
It's easy.
Kiwi.
Iguana.
Yes.
Because he was green. Yeah.
Oh, I see. That's nice. I think that you're probably there is, I know Maggie Finnegan, she's a young singer today. She's really into reptiles. She has like snakes and I think some spiders too.
Well, I had snakes when I was in college. I had snakes that, actually I lived in the sorority house for my last 2 years. And,
Which sorority?
Alpha Delta Pi.
Oh, 80 Pi. I was an SAE, so.
Well.
Same assholes everywhere. That's what they.
Yeah, exactly. You said it, I didn't.
Yeah, well, it's true.
I sneaked it into my room, and I had a triple room, so and I was never there anyhow, so I was always off at, opera workshop or choir or something or other, One day, one of my roommates who didn't know, one of my roommates knew that I had had a snake before, and then my other roommate didn't know. And so one of my roommates comes home with like everybody in a total furor, like, there's a snake upstairs! It's in your room! To my roommate. And she's like, 2 and 2 together. And so she goes in, and my other roommate is in the middle of the room on top of a chair like this, because she had warm laundry that she had put in the middle of the floor. And of course, my snake is not stupid.
He's like, this is great.
Was like, hey, this is great. Woo, And so she's undoing her laundry, and there's a snake in the middle.
You would have been the worst roommate ever.
That's a nightmare story.
In the sorority house. So, but the funny thing is my other friend, who's a dear, dear friend of mine, walks into the room and goes, oh, and just picks it up.
What kind of snake was this? Was it a
this was
python?
A California king. No, I wish.
King
I always
snake.
wanted a python. It was a California king snake, black and white, Really, really sweet snake, but yeah.
So that's really, before we get to the whole connection,
Sorry.
because this is a great sidebar. Everybody, just about everybody I know in the business has a pet of some sort. It's sort of a surrogate child for a lot of us, because a lot of folks put off, like for us, we put off having children until we're like, oh, well, when things get better in the opera business, we get a little more stable, we'll be able to have children.
Yeah, right.
Oops.
Well, don't wait until you're 50. Don't wait until you're 48.
I'll be 70 before this thing gets out. But snakes and iguanas and reptiles, oh my! That's a unique pet choice. I'm not judging.
Well, I really wanted
unique.
a dog. I desperately wanted a dog for forever. I like. We have the encyclopedia, the physical Encyclopedia Britannica, which ours was so old that it said. I'm really aging myself, but it was old when we were little.
Oh, when you said actual Encyclopedia Britannica, that us three know what that is. A lot of folks have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, so ours said in one section it said, and we hope one day to send a man to the moon.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So the D section with dogs was like so dog-eared that you could barely see it anymore, because I was always trying to choose what kind of dog I was going to get.
Oh wow.
And so when I finally got to Europe, and I moved over here, I said, well, I don't know if I'll ever have children, so I want to get a dog. And I had been inspired by Susie Graham, who had a dog. And yeah, Libby's so cute. And so I got a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel when I was singing in Paris, and they went on strike every day that we would. This is the very first beginning of the strikes that they did at Paris Opera. Was for my show, my Capuletti di Montecchi. And they struck every day that we would have a show, and then in between they would work. So I was so pissed off. So I was like, I'm going to get myself a dog. So I did. And so I got myself a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. And I said, well, I don't know if I'll ever have kids. And I was dating an Italian guy at that point. And I said, well, I don't know if I'll ever have kids, so I'll name it after my best friend. Well, my best friend was, he'd come on vacations with me and my boyfriend at the time with his girlfriend, and we'd meet up at least twice a year or whatever. I'd call him whenever I had boy troubles over the next, 20 years, 14 years, sorry. Well, so-and-so did me wrong. And I'd call him from the toilet half the time, this poor guy. Well, his name was Tullio, and that's what I named the dog. And I ended up marrying him 14 years later when we were finally both single at the same time. So then I married the original Tullio. Yeah, like half a year after, well, I got together with him half a year after my dog died. The dog, Tullio, died. And so people that I hadn't talked to, and you know how you don't talk to people for a while, and a lot of people you can just pick up with again. And I said, well, yeah, Tullio and I are going to Catania this weekend, and blah, blah, and he's like, well, didn't the dog die, Laura? They thought I was...
Boy, she's really losing it.
And I was like, no, this is the original Tullio, because most people knew the dog.
Yeah.
They didn't know that it was based on a person.
Yeah, I imagine some of the anecdotes could get a little confusing to folks that didn't know you guys were married.
I know, now we're married and we have 2 kids, so life is good.
Tullio was the sweetest dog. I mean, he was really, really wonderful. And Laura, we'll be skipping around in time here a little bit, Mike. But
that's okay.
Laura,
there's no rules here.
Laura made her debut at Houston Grand Opera shortly into my tenure. She's one of the first people I invited in 2001, shortly after September 11th. It was.
We had to come in late for the rehearsals.
We were late for rehearsals because of September 11th, and no one could fly. So it was the fall of 2001. Our opening night was Rigoletto, with which Mike just did our most recent opening night, Rigoletto, with Dmitri Boristovsky and Laura and Roberto Aronica, all 3 debuting.
Wow!
And Laura had an epic, spectacular success with the Houston public in that Rigoletto, and then she came back many, many, many times, each time equally successful. But shortly after, Laura, I don't remember if it was exactly the next year or maybe 2 seasons later.
I think it was a couple seasons later.
She came for Julius Caesar, for Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, and as a gift to me, gave me a Cavalier, King Charles Spaniel, that was the same coloring as Tullio, and because we were doing Julius Caesar, I named him Giulio, but we called him Julius. So I named him Giulio after Tullio, and because of the opera. And Julius Spaniel lived until about 3 years ago.
Oh my goodness!
But he was a gift from Laura, and so and also a wonderful dog. But a funny story about Tullio the dog, not Tullio the husband.
You know what it is?
It's
It's one of my old voice lessons just started playing because I pushed the button on my stylus.
There you go.
I thought it was your ringtone.
I was like, who's warming up over here? Who's back there? Oh, it's me. Well, making a terrible noise.
I immediately thought that sounds like Mike May.
Funny.
Sorry about that.
In about 90. Go ahead, Laura.
I thought it was his ringtone.
Yeah.
In about 96, Laura and I did a production of La Finta Giardiniera at the Washington Opera, as it was called then, at the Kennedy Center. Bitterly cold rehearsal period. We were just dying.
It was over New Year's, I think. Yeah.
And Laura decided to fly to Dallas to see her parents, and she asked me to keep Tullio, the dog, for a few days so that she didn't have to fly with him. So I had Tullio with me for however long it was, 3 or 4 days. And the weather, when Laura went back to Dallas, the weather in Washington, D.C. in January or February suddenly got warm. And really warm, like 70 degrees. It was so weird. And so I had, and it was not it was winter, so it wasn't big tourist season in Washington, D.C. And I took Tulio out for a long walk around Washington. And Tulio was the best, thanks to Laura, the best behaved dog. He followed every command. He would heel. He would do everything. And you didn't even need him on a leash, really. He would do anything you commanded. But he had done his obedience training in Italy, so he only knew his doggy commands in Italian. So, so I was walking Tulio around Washington, D.C., and we went along the south lawn of the White House. And Tulio healing, I took him off his lead because he was so good, and we were walking for probably an hour, and he saw a squirrel about 25 feet ahead of us, and he took off, and all commands went out the window. He wouldn't listen to me. He wouldn't come. He wouldn't do anything. And this squirrel went under the fence of the White House, and so did Tulio. Tulio squeezed his little body under the fence and took off on the south lawn of the White House towards the White House. And I'm stuck outside the fence, screaming in Italian to this dog to try to come back to me. And about 4 guys appeared, out of the doors of trees and things, and grabbed Tulio, who was chasing this squirrel and brought him back to me and said, this dog needs to be on a leash. So Tulio nearly got me arrested. It was hilarious. I'm saying ferma, ferma, ferma. Vieni qua, vieni qua. No, nothing. They must have thought I was an absolute. It was hilarious. It was hilarious.
But I have a question about that because, I've given people gifts before, and sometimes you give people the worst thing I've ever done. Not the worst thing, but a thing I've done many times has been like, I got you a bottle of wine or a nice bottle of whiskey, and they're like, well, I'm an alcoholic and I can't drink. And it's like, oops, so sorry. So that's kind of a gamble, gifting booze because you never know what somebody. Gifting a dog, now that's a big gamble. So how did you know you'd be like, great?
I knew it because he wanted to get a dog. And he wanted to get a Cavalier. And it's hard to find a Cavalier who doesn't have huge health problems, which, Julius ended up having some health problems, but they all do. Because it's a really inbred breed because they had to recreate it, in the 1900s. And so I wanted to make sure that he got a good one. And so I found one up around Dallas that supposedly, didn't have a lot of problems, and checked them out and, did all this stuff. And so I knew he wanted one, and he adored Tulio, my dog, and always wanted a dog just like that. So I thought, I know what to get him for Christmas.
I don't think it was a surprise. I think you told.
No, it wasn't really. I told you, yeah.
But it was it was a gift. But I think it wasn't like, here's your dog.
Here's a dog.
Yeah.
No.
Well, over the course of a 30-year-long relationship, there's always that moment, when you first, when it's singing Senza Mama, and this young artist who's like, I don't know what I'm doing, we all. And how long did it take for you guys to go from that sort of unknown quantity to 2 people who actually had that connection and began to sort of relate to each other in a different way beyond just conductor and singer or somebody who has casting power and a singer? How did you transcend that boundary?
Let me start that out because I didn't get to know him as a conductor. When I met him, he was the director of the Young Artist Program and a coach. Okay. And I was so pissed off because he started conducting more and more at San Francisco Opera. And I was so pissed off because, I'm like, I can't get a coaching with him anymore. I don't want to conduct. Damn.
Would you stop being so successful?
Will you stop conducting so I can have a coaching? Because he's probably the best coach I've ever worked with. And so I was like, damn, why do all these coaches always have to go conduct,
Yeah, right.
But then I'm actually glad that he conducts. And I've always been really proud of Patrick and what he's done and what he's accomplished. Good Lord. And at such a young age too, to have constructed the career that he's constructed, and such a. I find Patrick one of the most calming forces, for lack of a better word. And he's the person that I always call when I feel like I really need I need some advice, because I know that he will give me the answer that I need to hear, even if it's not what I want to hear. When
Not sure how
that.
calm I was in Bregenz.
Yeah, you were. No, I mean, God, that was so hard. Queen of the Night on a boat, with the most uncomfortable costume ever. My first Queen of the Night,
This is
outdoors.
at the Bregenz Festival.
Outdoors on a boat, an opera. Outdoors on a boat.
With a mic.
Put a pin in that.
With a
That may
mic.
be all we do
Oh,
from
but
now
wait,
on.
it gets better. And Patrick is indoors with the orchestra, and I see him on a screen that's like this big, from way, way, way far away, and there are two huge screens over here that are digital. And so they show the conductor and the orchestra to the public, which a lot of people don't know that digital is a lot more laggy than analog. And so we had this little bitty TV in the back that was analog that I could see like this, this. And not that that's his gesture, but that's how little it looked. And then over here I see, wah, over here, like 2-3 seconds later.
Seconds behind.
So ignore the waving man on the side and look for the little bitty thing in the back. So it was.
And it's one thing. I mean, they've done this
every time. Yeah, I'd never done the Queen of the Night before.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing, they've done this very successfully in Bregenz for years, but it's one thing if it's Tosca or something that is quite symphonic and the engine is the orchestra, and of course that is true with Mozart. But the kind of clarity you have to sing Mozart well is really challenging. In that situation, but we did it all right. But
of course,
I want to go back, Mike, to your question though about the beginnings of our relationship. It was very, very clear, really, from Sense of Mom onwards. It was very clear that Laura was, just extraordinarily gifted, and that what she needed was some time. She was so young. And at a time when singers that age did not go into young artist programs, that was very unusual.
Yeah, I was the youngest one to do it at that point.
Time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was really, Laura had already this incredible linguistic ability. She could. I mean, I felt like, if you plopped Laura down in, Yugoslavia, she'd be speaking to everybody within 3 days. She's just one of those type of linguistic minds. And Laura, don't you? I mean, you're now living in.
I have 2 degrees. I have a music degree and a foreign language major as well. I have a BA in foreign
and that's
language.
always been, that part of that, the linguistic part of being a young artist was so easy for her. So the challenge became, what is her career path, and what is, what will be the sets of works that she'll do in her 20s and then her 30s, and that kind of dreaming about Laura's career was what was so satisfying. And then when I was appointed in Houston, which was I was appointed in 1998 and I began in 99. So this is my 21st season in Houston. And so one of the first things we planned was that Rigoletto.
Oh wow, I didn't know.
And so Laura was one of the first singers that I had a hand in, both Laura and Dimitri, both for that Rigoletto, and then Julius Caesar, and then Lucia, probably. I'd have
Yeah,
to look
I
at
think it
all
was
the
Lucia after. Yeah.
yeah, Ilia in
Oh,
Idomeneo.
that was so nice.
There were just a whole string of wonderful performances, and
Yeah.
so and then of course in the middle of that time, between the time when Laura and I met and before I was appointed in Houston, I conducted twice in Dallas. The in Fair Park, the coronation of Popea in a
Oh,
realization that I did. That
I didn't
was,
know that.
I look at it now. I mean, and it's hilariously romantic. You know, it's
Oh,
much
really?
more. Yeah,
Who
and then
sang in it?
and I thought it was so early music. You know, echt at that time, but now I realize it was much more sort of Montevani than Monteverdi. But 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 it was it worked for that enormous hall. You
Yeah,
know,
especially for
Oh
Dallas.
my
Yeah.
goodness.
it
That
was Jack
beautiful hall
Trussell.
they had there in Fair Park.
Yeah,
Such a
Fair
great place to
Park.
sing in.
It was Jack Trussell and Anne Panagoulias was
Ah,
there,
oh my. Wow.
and gosh, Jeffrey Gull was
Oh
Ottone.
my gosh. Wow.
Kevin
Wow.
Langan was Seneca. Yeah,
Huh.
it was a wonderful group of
Yeah.
people, and Bliss Hebert's production.
Oh,
Um,
Bliss.
yes, yes,
Always with his
and
handkerchief around his neck. That's my favorite part.
and then I did a production of the Tempest by Lee Hoybe.
Oh,
Um,
you
in
did
about
that?
I conducted that. Yeah, yeah,
Oh my God, I didn't know that. Do you know that
and
they asked me to audition for that, and
yeah,
I basically, well, you should have told me. Darn it! This is when we should have used the internet back in the day. But
Right.
this is
we
before
didn't
cell
have the
phones.
internet.
I know. Well, the internet was, not everybody used it so much.
Oh
Good
And
no,
old
we had
days.
people. Oh no, I didn't have a cell phone when I started in Houston.
well,
No.
I remember in when was it? I remember what year was that? 1995. I was doing a show here in Turin, Mitridate, and Barbara Frittoli was Sifare, and
Mhm.
she had a cell phone. And I thought, who does she think she is? And here we are. I've got two
She's
cell
like,
phones, actually.
hello. Hold
Totally.
on.
Just a second. Yes.
Oh my.
Oh my
But
God.
then
Okay.
then when I started in Houston, I you know really didn't go to Dallas again until 2010 when we did Moby Dick.
Wow.
So there was a long hiatus when I didn't work in Dallas, but then Laura was having this success after success in Houston, but then you didn't sing in Dallas until probably
For
2010 or
forever.
later.
Yeah. Yeah. They had a couple of projects, but it was never something that I either could do or wanted to do. So it was always kind of a mix of a mismatch, let's say. Um, and so yeah, I was really happy when I finally was able to make my debut there in as Gilda in the same production. Well, same set basically, but a different director of Rioletto. And to be able to do that for my
Yeah.
home bodies was pretty darn great.
Well, I do
Yeah.
recognize that sensation because I mean, the Rigoletto that Patrick and I did it down in Houston
In Houston.
most
Yeah.
recently. That was,
Yeah.
that was 20 years into my career before I was able to come to my hometown company
Yeah.
and make my
Yeah.
debut. And there is something, I don't know, it adds another level. I mean, it's not pressure, it's just excitement and gratification
Yeah.
to be able to go away from your hometown and build your
And then come
career
back
and
and-
build your craft and get to a certain level and then come back and be able to walk into that place, as someone who's accomplished something outside of that world and bring that back to your home people. And it's just
Yeah.
it's
Well, it
the
was
most
interesting.
wonderful sensation.
I think what was interesting for me is because I had so many layers because I also went to SMU, and so I have not only childhood friends from church and church choir mainly because I was so involved with church choir, and then friends from high school, and then friends also from college because I went to college in Dallas, and a lot of them stayed in that area, and some of them were from there already. And so I had all these different parts of my life that came together to come watch me sing, and it's just so exciting to have, your old music teacher come and be like, "Oh, I'm so proud of you," and and all
See
your
what
old
I did?
buddies
Look,
from
I made
choir,
this.
who are like, "I always knew you'd do it," and all these things. I think that's the most special thing is when you make them proud. The problem with me is I have to make sure that I kind of disassociate myself because I get a little bit too involved.
Yeah.
And so I start to kind of imagine what they might feel like because I get all verklempt when I'm listening to people that I know. And so I start to get verklempt because I'm thinking they're probably feeling a little verklempt listening because I think I sang that pretty good.
That was pretty good. I bet I got him.
But I got them.
Yeah.
So I have to watch it that I don't get myself too while I'm doing it because I'm imagining.
I had a whole crew of high school folks show up. Both choir directors from high school came.
Wow.
And my sister brought a whole contingent from her office. I think my sister sold about 50 tickets.
Oh, my mom.
Just
I'm
herself.
Sure. I didn't want to talk
And
about yeah.
the night they came, I know Patrick had to hear it because when we cheer in my family, it's like at a football game. It's just like, wow, yeah! Like it's,
Yeah.
the thing she asked was, would it be okay if I brought my cowboys, my cowbells, and my shakers? And I was like, well, I mean, I don't care. But they may yell at you. I would love it. Yeah, bring the air horn. The vuvuzela. Make sure I bring the vuvuzela.
Totally.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, ultimately, I think, the part of this industry, and I mean the industry, not the art.
Yeah.
I think the part of the industry that sustains you and that is really meaningful is entirely in the relationships with the people that you work with. Because if you're looking for meaning in something other than that, if you're looking for meaning in a review, or in money, or in some other determining factor you have no control over, you're not going to find it, and you're going to be unhappy, and you won't be a better artist. It's the relationships that you make and that you sustain that continually make you better, because it's I'm always very wary of people who say they're perfectionists, because I think that's such a cop-out, because no actual artist is looking for perfection, because perfection is an end of a road.
Yeah.
What you're looking to be is better.
Yeah.
And the thing that makes you better is the relationship that you have with people that you respect and love. And I know I was always I'm always a better conductor with the greater the singer, the better the conductor. And hopefully vice versa.
Yeah. No, it is true. Well, also I think there's something to be said about also growing, especially since this is such an itinerant business, that you end up going someplace, and even if you say, can you really give me some real feedback? I want to know what you think and whatever. People don't give it to you because they're afraid that they're going to, because a lot of people will say, I want feedback, and they don't really want it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to rely on those kind of, when you really get with somebody you know really well, and you know that they're not going to be blowing smoke, they're going to be telling you like it is.
Yeah.
And they know where you've come from too, so they know maybe things that you have a tendency to do, like, oh, you're always late. Patrick calls me the late Laura Claycomb. So I've tried to work on that, but also musically, to stay on the front of the beat and follow your breath forward instead of kind of sitting on it and whatever. That's something that I know I have to work on. But also, most conductors don't know that. And so, somebody who knows you really well can say, no, you need to stay ahead of the beat right in this place, because whatever. And people who know you really well can also tell you if things are not so great.
Yeah.
Because I had a really tough time in Santa Fe, years, I forget what year that was, 2008. And I just was suffering from the altitude. And everybody said, "Oh, you'll be fine in a week. Oh, you'll be fine in 2 weeks." And I was like, and then
And the smoke and the allergies and everything else.
I was never, I was still sucking on oxygen backstage between scenes, and we were
It's
doing
so
Brava Misto.
dehydrated. Yeah.
I started jogging. It was that bad because
Yeah.
Laura doesn't jog. So anyhow, so I was trying all this stuff, and I know I was not singing my best, and but everybody was like, "Oh, you sound lovely, Laura," and "Oh, it's just so fabulous." Da 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 da. And I was like, I was so depressed because I knew that I wasn't singing well, and I just couldn't get the oomph up for it, and so. Bill Burden came to the show, and I know Bill for forever, and we've sung together so many times. And he said, "Great job, Laura." And I said, "Oh my God, Bill, it's really horrible." And he said, "Laura, it was good enough, and it's not the best that I've heard you sing, but it was still good." And that's a true friend
So
who will
refreshing.
actually tell you, it wasn't great, but but it was good enough for what you were doing. And and there'll be times like that when you won't, in a long career especially, that you won't be stellar every time. And it's a shame that you can't be, but you got to find those certain things. Sometimes you got to you live and you learn. But it's so nice to be able to have friends who will actually tell you, because most of the time, people that you're working with are too afraid to step on your toes to tell you the truth. And
I think
I've told quite a few colleagues when I thought they're having problems or something, and they did most of the time, they don't really want to know.
Well, so much of that, I mean, just like Patrick was saying, is that relationships that you build over time.
Yeah.
You get to a certain comfort level where you're able to say things to people. And that's one of the things about opera for me that has always been challenging, because I grew up bluegrass, southern gospel, country music, playing that kind of stuff. And it's much more collaborative. And when you play with the same people all of the time, you're able to do that. Megan and I have been playing with these two fantastic bluegrass musicians all summer long. One from the Blue Canyon Boys, Jason Hicks, and Casey Groves, who started the band Uncle Earl, which Abigail Washburn, who's now married to Bella Fleck, was in. And working with them just over the course of the summer, we had the same thing that we all as itinerant artists encounter every time. They call it the first day of school. You walk in and everybody's kind of like nervous and not sure what to say, and et cetera. And when you have those relationships, then you're able to really dig into the quick. You're really able to dig into the quick of the score, and you're not so careful and tiptoey and eggshelly about what to say and how to do, and you begin to be much more collaborative. That's one of the things that really frustrates me about our art form, is that so much of what we do is like a pickup band. You just kind of throw it together, and you get maybe sometimes 2 weeks, but maybe if you're lucky, you have 4 or 5 weeks of rehearsal. And by the time you get to the last performance, and a lot of these, especially I had a largely regional career, community opera career for the first part of my life. And you may rehearse for two weeks and get 2 performances and you're done.
And that's it.
You just don't have time to dig in and to open up yourself and to be able to receive that way.
I mean, I love what you say there, Mike, about that, because to the job of being a performer, really, whether you're on stage or you're conducting or you are directing, the job is to take all of what you are, all of your soul and your knowledge and your intellect and your love and everything that you are, and put that away and go out there and perform empty and let the work fill you back up. And that is really, really hard to do, because the last thing a conductor needs on the podium is knowledge. Now, you have to have a lot of knowledge to get there and to know what you're doing. I'm not suggesting that you can't know what you're doing. You have to know fully what you're doing. But the job at the moment of performance is not knowledge and it's not intellect. It's emptiness, and it's our relationships. And I remember in that Rigoletto, Laura's, what I now call Laura's Rigoletto, with all due respect to the departed Dmitri, who I loved, who Laura and I both loved. But I remember, through the rehearsal period, we talked about various ideas, things. And I believe, Laura, if my memory serves, as we got near the dress rehearsal, I asked you if you would consider, because I knew that you technically could do it, if you would consider a pianissimo top E natural above high C to end the Cara Nome scene. And Laura and I tried it alone in a rehearsal room, and we, for quite a few days, as I remember, we tried it, but with no one else around. We wouldn't let the music staff be there, or all the opinion culture people be there. None of that. It was just the two of us.
Or whatever.
Opinion culture, I like that. Opinion.
And I said, try it at the dress rehearsal. I think, Laura, is what I said. I said, try it at the dress rehearsal and see how it feels. And if you don't like it, we know we can go back to the other, the other way. So at the end of the scene, not the end of the aria itself, because the guys sing a little bit at the end of the aria. At the end of the scene, Laura was staged to leave, to walk off stage. And it's written, just with an E natural trill to an F sharp, a long trill that resolves. But we worked out a climbing arpeggio that ends on a top E natural that she sang pianissimo. It was very easy for her. So she did it at the dress, and it was so spectacular that I think that's all anyone remembers of that production. And she did a lot of other wonderful things in that.
But people are like, oh my God.
But I would never have asked. First of all, I wouldn't ask someone to do that if I didn't think they could, or if I thought it would unnerve them in any way. But it was because of the long relationship we had. I thought, well, I'll bring it up, and I'll see how it feels, and I'll just say the words and see how they feel when they leave you.
Yeah.
And
And
do you remember that?
I remember that I jumped on that like a dog on a bone. I thought you never asked,
It was unconventional.
Yeah, true. But actually, it used to be a convention, but nobody did it anymore.
Well, it's
not,
probably because they couldn't.
Well,
there's like one person that can do that. So.
Well, it's funny because I've heard a lot of people. I mean, I've done it over the years since then, and I think a lot of conductors were like, "Oh no, that's not good taste," and they poo-pooed it right from the beginning without hearing it. And I said, "Just let me sing it. Just let me do it for you," because the way that I do it and the way that we worked it out, Patrick and I, was so that it serves the music and it serves the scene. And it's this kind of reverie as you go off stage. It's not, bah, bah, it's not,
no, not
look
at all.
Me at all. It's me wandering off stage like, oh, wow, And so if you can do it that way, great. And it doesn't become a dog and pony show.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I've ever had anybody tell me, no, you can't do it after I've done it for them, because it can be pianissimo, because it can be sustained. And I actually find it a hell of a lot easier than sustaining an E,
the trill.
A trill on a trill.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I
It's
mean,
like writing passaggio. Ugh.
Yeah, I feel similarly about the top E flat in the end of the first act of Traviata. If it's uncomfortable, don't do it. I mean, I don't think, and if it doesn't serve the music, don't do it. I think it's so silly to base a conception of a part around one note.
I find the dog and pony element of a lot of stuff that we do really does push the audience away. you know.
Yeah.
And
Terrible.
when
Yeah.
it's so carefully done, and it actually brings them up to the stage with you, as opposed to, blah, like, look at me. Hey, I said look at me.
Yeah.
Something like that is so intimate. I've not heard it, but just the way you describe it and knowing how you sing, I'm like, nah, that's gonna be. I would be like, oh yes, that's
Well,
what I
that's
want.
what it was supposed to be, yeah.
Yeah.
What was funny is my mom said afterwards, "Oh, you got a standing ovation." I'm like, "Yeah, right." And then the next show, I looked out at the monitor once I got off stage, and I saw the level of glasses go. You see the shine in your glasses? I saw it go. I was like, "Oh my God, my mom was right."
Yeah, our audience isn't the Beatles audience. Like
No.
when you look out,
Yeah.
one thing people probably don't realize is that when we stand on stage, and there's lots of light coming off the stage into the audience. So when you're on the stage, you look out and all you see is the reflection of glasses.
Reflection of glasses.
A sea of glasses.
It's so funny. I never thought about it until then.
Yeah.
Really funny.
Well, I have to go to a 12 o'clock meeting, so I have 7 minutes. So
Okay.
I want us to get to whatever. We haven't talked about Dallas very much.
I know.
Well, we talked
But-
about the connection. That's the most important thing. It's. I
Okay.
mean, what for me, what's great about this relationship and the kind of relationship that this show has been able to explore is this. Like I said before, a lot of what we do is so fleeting, and we rarely get the chance to have the kind of long-term relationship with people. I mean, it's hard to have a long-term relationship in your personal life when you're doing this business. And to be able to have a long-term professional relationship that, again, you're able to build on and build that sort of comfort and trust. And Laura, you were talking about when you had a real deep question or something that you needed advice, and to be able to have a confidant that you can actually trust and somebody who has a different perspective.
Yeah.
Like, is there a
And
moment
knows
that you guys can remember that one of those times when one of you called the other and was like, I don't know what to do right now. What do I do? How can I get through this?
Which one is my
Yeah.
question? I mean, I've had some weird ass things. Well, somebody wanted me to do, I think it was Trovatore. I can't remember what it
Yeah,
was. They're like, yeah, but we'll do it, in a Baroque way, or I don't remember what it was,
Yeah.
but it's something,
It was
I
very
guess.
good.
I don't remember what it was. Oh, and then the latest one was Lady Macbeth, and I was like, I remember he wrote that he wanted it to be an ugly voice. I'm like, oh crap.
Well, it's not what I do.
So,
Well, I mean, I don't think that all you can
I
do
mean, that
is
was obvious, of course, but yeah.
well, not necessarily. I mean, there were things that we never did Capuletti Montecchi together, but you did it a lot and
Yeah.
and marvelously, and there were pieces we didn't get to do together.
Yeah.
And I didn't conduct your Daughter of the Regiment.
I know, darn it.
don't remember why, but I couldn't do it
You
here.
were doing another show right at the same time. You were doing with Eva Podles. What was it?
Ballo.
You were doing
Yeah.
Ballo, that's why. Yeah.
Ballo. Yeah, that's right. But I do remember, Mike, to answer your question, and Laura may not remember this, but it was very meaningful for me at the time. When we did La Finta Giardiniera in the Kennedy Center, it was the Washington in the Eisenhower Theater, in the smaller theater.
Yeah.
And that was in the winter, and my brother, my oldest brother, Tony, died that October, totally unexpectedly, at age 52. I've now outlived him by 6 years, and I was in no shape to work. I really was grieving because it was a sudden death, and I wasn't conducting well. I just wasn't able to fully show up. And there were issues with a member of the music staff there who was saying bad things about me and things that happened. And I remember simply saying to Laura at a rehearsal, I just can't find any of these tempos, and I feel like I'm just terrible, and I really should go home because I just wasn't in a place to work. And she said, we're all with you, and we trust your instincts, and just stay with the music for those few hours a day that you can.
Yeah.
And it was simply, it was the best thing she possibly could have said, because it just brought me back to the relationship. Michaela Martins was in that cast. You know, it was a group of people that I knew very well, and I found it very, very comforting. And that is, you know, that's not advice about repertoire. And I wasn't, you know, I wasn't asking how to conduct something, but it was simply the act of being heard by a colleague who I loved and respected, and it really helped.
It's funny because during that same exact production, I had just broken up with my Italian boyfriend.
Right.
And I thought life was over and I wanted to cancel. And why did I not cancel? Because of Patrick and because of Beth Clayton, my two colleagues there.
Clayton was in it too, that's right.
Beth was my roommate in college on choir tours.
That's right.
And so she's an old friend. And, you know, I thought, oh no, I have to cancel. I don't want to come. I'm not going to be able to sing. So we were both grieving during that.
We were both in a state of joy.
And yeah, I'd forgotten that was the exact same time as your brother too. But the reason I showed up was because they said, no, you have to come. Just get your ass over here and, you know, and hang out with us and you'll be fine. And I was. But, you know, I just wanted to, you know, stop the world, let me off. And you know, music has a way to, you know, number one, just get you out of yourself and get you out of your own, you know, circular thinking and whatever, and just make you do, at least for us who are musicians, but also to just make you receive as well, I think.
Just
and
work.
those relationships.
Go to
Yeah,
work.
just do the work. Just do the work. And I don't think that's every work. I don't think you could, not necessarily every work would give you, you know, the same kind of balm that music could give us. And thank God we were doing Mozart, right? You know?
Oh, yes. Marvelous opera, too.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
I'm sorry I have to go to another meeting. I want to stay and talk. Mike?
Let me just wrap this up by saying that right now, at this time in our country's history, in our world's history, in the history of our industry, there's so much darkness. There's so much animus and animosity, not just between people of disparate political, cultural, psychological, whatever beliefs, but even within our own industry. There's so much animosity. And it is easy to forget when we're not able to do these things, when we're not able to go into the music and give ourselves that break from our own reality, that for me has been the thing that always brought me back to opera. It gives me a vacation from being this guy, because being this guy, you know, is the worst thing for me ever. I want to be somebody else all the time. But to be able to get an insight into to your relationship that you guys had, that provided you with such comfort. I know that for me, this hour here has given me a tremendous amount of comfort, just knowing that these things are out there. And it reminds me of all the relationships that I have in this business that I'm thankful for. And I'm very thankful to both of you for coming on and sharing your story with us and sharing your relationship. And I know that there are people out there that will also receive a balm just from having heard you guys speak. So thank you both so much.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us.
Great to talk to you, Mike. And
You bet.
Laura, I miss you. We'll see you
Thank
soon.
you.
Yeah. I need iguana pictures.
Okay. I'll
And
send
snake
you
pictures.
one
You got them.
I gotta find one.
Awesome. All right. We'll see you guys.